Hello there, welcome back to the channel. This is Nerd.World History and the continuation of the Celtic tribes of ancient pre-Roman Britannia series continues. This time we're stretching our gaze a little bit further north. We finally covered all the tribes that consist in the territories of what are known as England and Wales, and that just leaves the tribes further north of Hadrian's Wall that operated in the territory now known as Scotland. Today we will be looking at a tribe known as the Selgovae, and I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. The Selgovae operated in a territory in the lowlands of Scotland, approximately just north of Hadrian's Wall, between Dumfries in southern Scotland and may have extended far south as Northumberland and Strathclyde. It is notable that their namesake in the modern age is that they lent their name to the Solway Firth, and that the tribe itself may have been an offshoot from the Brigantes tribe. Unfortunately, relatively little information is known about the origins of this tribe due to their location being so far north, and realistically we don't know much about it because the Celts tended to not write anything down. First-hand accounts of them only really come when the Romans turn up, and the Romans start hearing about them through third parties. The Romans extend that far north, and the Romans have direct contact with them, and that wasn't really until about the AD 70s that the Romans really start to reference them, although they are referenced by Ptolemy about the era of 140 AD. The tribe was momentarily conquered into the Roman Empire for approximately 20 years or so during the time between the Romans occupying the territory just north of Hadrian's Wall and as far north as the Antonine Wall, but eventually with them withdrawing further south back to Hadrian's Wall, this became the border. This tribe as a result remained independent and free of Roman rule pretty much forever, although they did often trade with the Romans. It is likely, and I am delving into deep speculation here, for those that don't know, if you've heard one of the many ancient sort of mysteries of the Romans, and that is the loss of the ninth. That means the ninth legion. The Romans actually had a few legions disappear over the years, like the 22nd and others. The ninth were lost somewhere, theoretically in Britain. Now I am going to have people comment that they might not have been. They may have continued existing on the borders of Germany, in the mainland of Europe, and they may have also had records of them in other parts of the Roman Empire post this period, and that's all valid. But there is a reason it is a mystery. We don't really know what happened to the ninth, but one of the most compelling theories is that the ninth were part of an invasion sent north into Scotland that failed miserably. Now, if that is the case, the ninth were totally and utterly obliterated, with very little of them remaining after this campaign, if anyone at all survived it. And the Selgovae would have been part of this confederacy of tribes that would have beat the ninth legion. Whether that legion was at full strength, hindered in some way, or whatever, we don't really know, and I'm not really going into it because that's all post-Roman stuff. The problem is I don't know a great deal about this tribe from before the Romans, because as stated, the Romans are the ones who are the first-hand accounts, so the further into Scotland I get, unfortunately, the more circumstantial the information is going to get. For example, I don't know, and likely never will know, when this tribe was first established. What year, how long it existed for, anything. The only real evidence are archaeological. You've got to look at the structures that they made, and you've got to look at the language that they used, which was a form of Brythonic, which was basically similar to Welsh, which was pretty much the common language all across the British Isles in that time period. And I know that is an extremely broad statement because I'm not including various different Gaelic dialects and other such variations, but we have to remember that the Celts all spoke interconnected, related languages, but not necessarily the same one. And yeah, this tribe, before anyone else mentions it, because I have had people mention this before, that all these tribes were the Picts. So, although I'm not covering the Picts, because the Picts are contemporary with the Romans and post-Roman, just a little context for who and what the Picts are for those who aren't aware. The Picts, or the people of Pictland, or painted peoples, are basically the people that inhabited Scotland before it was known as Scotland. That would include these people, so yes, you are correct, these people are Picts. But broadly speaking, Pict, not a Celtic word, it is a Latin word. It was a racial slur used by Latin-speaking people from southern Britain and across the Roman Empire to refer to what was left of the independent Celtic domestic tribes that lived in Britain that were north of Hadrian's Wall. These were considered hostile, fierce, ferocious barbarians that of course the Romans traded with on a routine basis and really wanted as part of their empire, but that's another story. Giving them this racial slur of Pict, the people north of the border eventually adopted it as their own and became known as the Picts. They would call themselves the Picts, but the Picts were more of a confederacy, and for one reason or another they ended up under the sort of the sway of a singular group known as the Caledonian tribe. And Caledonia, as you may know, is also another name for Scotland. And although my knowledge of, unfortunately, domestic languages in Britain other than English is limited, I know that the origins of these things are all in the murky depths of prehistory, but basically to call these people Pict is accurate and inaccurate at the same time. They are Picts because they would become Picts. But this video is not about Pictish culture, which is contemporary and post-Roman. They would become part of that Pictish nation at a later date. They existed as a singular state both before, during, and probably after the establishment of what was known as Pictland. So the Selgovae were still an autonomous people as part of a larger confederacy that was opposed to the Romans during the time of the Romans and before their invasion. So, yes, they are Picts, but they are also the Selgovae. Just to make it a little bit clear, because there has been some confusion in the past with people not really understanding when the Picts were and who exactly what they were. And to anyone that might think it, no, another culture did not simply sweep into Scotland and replace them. As a Scots person will tell you, Scots are of Celtic culture rather, and Picts were not another culture. They were not people from Scandinavia, for example, that came in, called themselves Picts and lived there for a bit until the Celts kicked them out. That's not how it works. That's not who they were. The Picts were Celts. They were the Celtic peoples of Scotland at that time. I'm going into this more than I really wanted to, but as I'm not really covering that specifically, I did want to mention it because it has come up in some of my feedback before. And I just wanted to establish that yes, it is still accurate to call them Picts, but no, that's not who I am covering. The Picts are a bigger, more broader, more coherent culture than what these are. And I also know more about them, even though they're fairly relatively mysterious, which is ironic, considering how little we do know about them. Now, I'll try and leave a link to what is a pretty good timeline website that I've occasionally used as reference for some of these more obscure tribes in the links below, which will give you a bit more information about this specific tribe, and it'll also tell you the origins of their name, which is both Brythonic, potentially Anglo-Saxon, which is annoying because we don't. It's all complicated. Basically, words and names adapt, change over time. It's most likely of a combination of a sort of Gallic Brythonic wording, which basically translates as to hunt or people of the hunt, which is interesting that these people saw themselves as hunters, and they were certainly not a hunter-gatherer culture, as that is another stereotype of pre-Roman Britain that I really want to throw out here. They were not a hunter-gatherer society waiting for the Romans to turn up and civilize them. The tribe's capital was at, and I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly, so I apologise, Eildon Hill, which is near Melrose. The Romans later built a fort in this area. As I said, the Romans did, temporarily at least, conquer this region into the empire. And yeah, although it didn't last, there is an impression in the area such as Roman roads and numerous forts, some of which were even made of stone, scattered across this general area of the Scottish lowlands. It should be noted the Romans never made any significant headway into the highlands, although there were excursions and even naval voyages all the way around the island. They never really penetrated successfully into the Scottish Highlands. So, go the ancient Scottish Celts. It should be noted that in the AD 70s is when this tribe was first properly encountered. It was during the conquest of the Brigantes. This tribe likely came to the aid of the Brigantes, and along with others that lived in the area, such as the Votadini tribe, who I've previously done a video on, and the other tribes that I will be covering soon, would have come to the aid of the Brigantes to try and push the Romans back. But this tribe is also known to have abandoned several of its hill forts that were further south towards Rome, likely around the same time that the Brigantes fully fell, and they would have been facing the Romans totally on their own, and they fell back to more secure locations a bit deeper within their territory. Over the next numerous years, few decades, territory of the Roman Empire would flex somewhat over this area. They will be in the empire, out of the empire over the next few decades. But basically they were secured as part of the empire, but eventually, as we all know, the Romans would eventually retreat all the way back to Hadrian's Wall. Ptolemy, in the 140s, confirms that the Selgovae do still exist, and that they have various towns and major settlements and other things which trade with the Romans, most likely, down close to the great fortification that is Hadrian's Wall, which in modern times these are Newstead and a few other scattered towns that are still in existence across southern Scotland. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce their original names because I give up. I just give up with the Celtic words. I'm sorry. It was also not long after this that there was another attempt by, of course, Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who would sort of re-annex this territory, but it wouldn't last, and eventually again they would withdraw. And just basically from then on, the area remained independent. It would also be around that time that, just to put it into context, that's when we start really seeing Pictish culture take off. And also this area would also be invaded later by Irish invaders coming from the west. That would be the... And again, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation. I was taught that the pronunciation is Scotia, but it might be the Scotti or something like that, who were peoples that came from Ireland, and they obviously lent their name to what is now Scotland. And of course, yes, it's more complicated than that, but that's not what this video is about. In brief, that is the basics of this tribe. Unfortunately, as I said, being a tribe that didn't have a great deal of contact, there aren't many names or faces that come out of the murky, faceless depths of history to explain these people and really get a good connection to them. But we should remember that they did exist. They opposed the Romans, and although were occasionally conquered, they remained independent and free, and it is their culture and society that survived and went on to become part of the Pictish and later Scottish identity, not as heavily influenced by the Roman and later Anglo-Saxon conquests of the southern parts of Britain, which has so heavily altered and changed the culture south of Hadrian's Wall, so much so that pretty much it's unrecognizable from its early prehistoric roots in this time period. But as much as we think that there's a lot of differences between us, one of the things I'm trying to make people aware is that we all started the same, but the journey that's taken us over the millennia has took us to perhaps to different locations, but who and what we are did start out the same and more similar than different. Perhaps more so than what we are now. And we have the Romans to thank for that. So thank you, Roman Empire. And that is the basic history of the Selgovae, a tribe that existed just north of the English border into Scotland and controlled pretty much the whole of central lowlands of Scotland, from Hadrian's Wall all the way up to almost the borders of the Highlands themselves. If you made it all the way to this video, I thank you for watching. Please check out the other videos in this playlist, and more are coming soon. I am aware that my upload for this channel has significantly decreased in speed to what it used to be. That is because I do have several channels, and I also work full-time, recently changed jobs, various other things get in the way, and these videos can take quite a lot of research, and I try to be selective with the information because I encourage you to go out and learn about these peoples yourselves, their homes, their cities, their settlements, their constructions, who and what they did, and I try to make it a more bite-sized, more digestible length of episode just to get you aware of the existence of these people. And remember that they did once exist and are as much a part of our history as any other culture or society that has existed on these shores and around them for thousands of years, and they shouldn't just be forgotten and dismissed as the Picts or the Celts or the ancient Britons, because to me those are broad, inaccurate and highly somewhat disrespectful and definitely dismissive terms for a people that may have evolved in a vacuum, may have developed culturally different to what we're used to, but they did exist and we are their descendants, and they're as much a part of our history as anyone or anything else. Now, with that little speech out of the way, we're at the end of this video and I thank you for watching. I just want to take this moment to thank you for watching that video. If you liked what you saw, please check out my social links in the description box below to Instagram and Twitter and others, and also is down there a link to my Patreon page where you can support this channel and the others as I try to grow this franchise and do this more regularly. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you for watching and bye bye.